Okay, I think we'll get started now. So, hello everybody. You're very welcome to our event this afternoon. What is the carbon cost of your lunch? And my name is Paula Brennan. I'm librarian in Dublin City Libraries. And we are in partnership today for our event with Vita and with Irish Aid. And we're absolutely delighted they decided to come on board with us today. So just to let you know that this event is being recorded live at the moment, and the recording will be available on Facebook and on YouTube at a later date. But as this is a webinar, none of the audience will be visible. The only people who will be visible on the live event and also on any recordings will be the panelists themselves. So speaking of the panelists, we have some fantastic panelists who were really thrilled decided to join us today. And I would like to introduce you to Pat Kane. Pat Kane herself is a sustainability advocate. She is a speaker and she's also the founder of Reuzi. So I would like to introduce you now to Pat and give the floor over to her. Now, Pat, it's all yours.
Paula. Thanks very much, Paula.
You're welcome.
Hello, everyone. Hello, panelists. I can't wait to start talking to you. But basically, before we start, guys, a bit of housekeeping. I want to ask you to please share your photos of your lunch today on social media, and remember to use the hashtag #CarbonCostMyLunch. You can tag Vita, you can tag Evocco, myself, Rozanne, Medhanie. We would love to see what you're eating today. And don't feel guilty. We're going to talk all about it. Also, if you want to receive Rozanne's notes on your inbox, notes from today, please do subscribe to her newsletter. All you need to do is check Rozanne's page on Instagram. So Rozanne Stevens, that's with a Z, Rozanne. So without further ado, today I'm joined by a bunch of incredible people. Some I've worked with before and some I'm just meeting right now. So Hugh, Medhanie, and Emily, and of course Rozanne, to discuss food. Obviously, who doesn't want to talk about food, right? Food is one of those things we never really stop thinking about. I know I don't. And we buy, we cook, we eat it, and we don't really think about what we're doing. All we want is to crave, I suppose, satiate our cravings. But the truth is, we should really stop to think about what's going on our plates, what we are consuming, where are these bits coming from, I guess, and all of that. To give you an idea before we start, I would consider myself quite conscious on all things, I suppose, consumption. But a few months ago, I found myself staring at my salt and pepper and thinking, where do you come from? So it turns out the salt and pepper in front of me had traveled much more than the average human being will ever travel. The black pepper was produced in India, packed in South Africa, sent to London, and then to Dublin. And the salt was not much different from Pakistan to South Africa, London, and then Ireland, which is like mind-blowing. And that is only salt and pepper, the most basic things you can think of, right? So again, the average person in the world, an average person will only travel so much in their own lifetime. But here you go, these two basic things traveling the world. So without further ado, let's start this. Let's ask the experts, what is the carbon cost of your lunch? Where does your food come from? And tell us, guys, what processes are involved in getting all of that, on our plates, I guess. Hugh, I'm going to start with you then. Hello, by the way, long time no see.
Yeah, it's been a while.
What would you estimate is the carbon cost of the launches that you've been looking at, and in general, what is the story?
Yeah, absolutely, Pat. Thanks very much for the introduction. I'm Hugh Weldon, CTO of Evocco, and I've done some quick calculations on a few sample lunches that I'm going to share with you all now. So I'm just going to share my screen. So do let me know if this all appears as it should. So can everyone see my screen?
Yeah.
Great. First of all, so to give you a bit of background on myself, so I'm the Chief Technical Officer of Evocco. It's a mobile app that's available in Ireland and the UK to help people track, improve, and offset the climate impact of their food purchases. We source our environmental impact data from a life cycle assessment company. So life cycle assessment is the methodology used to calculate the impact of a product from cradle to grave. The company is called Eternity and based in Switzerland. and our offsetting runs through gocarbonneutral.ie. When it comes to food system emissions, there are a few things that you should understand, and two numbers in particular what you should know. First of all, it accounts for over 1/4 of global greenhouse gas emissions. It's an absolutely huge chunk when we look at the food system. So 27.6% thereabouts, depending on what source you reference. So it's an absolutely huge chunk, and we simply cannot limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius without transforming the food system and the way we interact with food. The second number to know in here is that developed nation diets, that's European, North American diets primarily, have to reduce by a minimum of 75% in their CO2 impact by 2050 if we're going to eat within planetary boundaries, if we're going to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. So that's a huge change that's required, and we simply cannot contain global warming without a shift to more sustainable diets. But what's the breakdown of that impact? Well, this source, Qantas, a life cycle assessment company also based in Switzerland, estimates the 27.6% of global greenhouse gas emissions to be primarily from agriculture. That's 24% of the 27.6%. In and around 80-90% of the food system emissions come from the agricultural processes required to produce the food. So what does that mean in layman's terms, or when you're heading to the shop? Well, it means what's much more important than how your food is packaged or where it comes from is what the food you're buying actually is. That's when it comes to CO2 is the single most important thing. So now we're going to have a look at these lunches. So the first up, kindly provided by the team. These were lunches that were eaten yesterday. So if we take, say, a simple, like popular ham and salad sandwich, could be approximately 630 grams of CO2. So what this would have been calculated by breaking down the ingredients, the mass per ingredient, and then assigning the climate impact scores. And if we're to talk about, well, what we need to achieve in terms of the reduction in our dietary CO2 by 2030, this one sandwich could be about 1% of your monthly budget for food if you're to eat within planetary boundaries. Then another example would be a simple salad lunch, which would have, like, say, rice noodles, sweet potato, hummus, some bread on the side. That would be vastly reduced impact of 360 grams thereabouts of CO2, which would be just over 0.5% of your monthly CO2 budget for food by 2030. And then better again, a veg sandwich in this case, aubergine, leeks, yogurt sauce and salad, down to 325 grams of CO2 and 0.5% of your monthly CO2 budget to eat within planetary boundaries. So I think that's a good start point for the conversation. Very much so that each of these analyses are based upon certain estimations, and there are some things we can track and there's some things we can't track. But these are good rules of thumb that increasing the percentage of plant-based meals that you eat is probably the first place to start when it comes to reducing the climate impact of your lunch. So I'll stop sharing my screen now and back over to you, Pat.
So, Hugh, this is so impressive. This is incredible. So it's incredible to see how much meat represents when it comes to your carbon, like your GHG or your carbon emissions, right? Mm-hmm. So in real life, because you would look at that and it's a ham sandwich, right? I wouldn't eat meat, but like I see a ham sandwich being a very, harmless thing. You look at it and you're like, it's a ham sandwich, not major. Mm-hmm. So, and I would say the majority of the people around us, at least until now, would think the same. What to do not to, like, basically in simple terms, not to freak out, right? Because you'll be looking at everything here, it's like, oh no, definitely not that, So obviously you mentioned reduce the amount of meat and plant-based diet, increase in plant-based diet, that's brilliant. But is there anything that's like, don't freak out, maybe it's a combination of what you do rather than like, you know, being like so specific with each meal. So how would you go about that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Pat. And I think absolutely, like, I would say it's important to understand the seriousness of the situation when it comes to climate, but it's also important to have like that positive outlook, because it is something that we can address. And very much when speaking with friends who have, I suppose, come aware as I've started using Evocco, it's more about, I suppose, piece by piece, take the first step on your climate action journey. Don't feel like you have to achieve everything on day one. And I suppose, like, be kind to yourself in that process. It's not like just because it's something you weren't aware of that you're the villain in this case, or anything. Far from that. We don't even like using a language such as that to describe this. So basically, the first thing to do is just take that first step on your climate action journey. And we say the first step is to, like, maybe start tracking your impact, or to start like reading more about what the different impact is, and then finding what suits your taste and your needs. So it's not like, we don't say like be absolutist and be vegan for day one. We definitely wouldn't even use that kind of terminology. What we'd say is just like, find products you really like, and then find products that you're like, well, I don't even really like this, and I'm only eating it because I always have. And then try and see if you can reduce from those first before working up to something that, say, maybe you really love. And it's all about like a balance is what we would say. And even approaching it with that mindset is more liberating, and it's more motivational than approaching it from the mindset of like, I'm doing everything wrong and everything has to change.
And the same goes, I suppose, for sustainable living in general, isn't it? Step by step, small steps add up.
Exactly.
It's interesting then, because I would love to ask Rozanne, Emily, and Medhanie, you know, I'm always hearing like also, you know, obviously shop local, shop seasonal. And we're always hearing, you know, like I heard once that it's worse to buy a tomato out of season in Ireland than buying something coming from abroad. And I was like, what? So hard to know. So guys, I'm opening the floor here for you guys. You know, how do you factor in the carbon cost of your meals? You know, or do you at all? Do you do it? You know?
Just a bit of an intro to the way I approach things. So you may or may not know, but I run a zero waste test kitchen in DCU. So obviously we look at the whole food system, but we're very much focused on preventing food waste. That would be one of our main focuses. So we, as an integral part, as a foundation of our work, we look to the SDGs. And our job is to find the harmonious intersection between SDG 3, which is human health and well-being, and responsible consumption, SDG 12. And that is where the area that we're trying to work in, so that there is, and we're talking about a more balanced view on the matter, but there has to be a more plant slant and a more planetary outlook. Hugh mentioned, you know, living within our planetary boundaries, and it's very, very much like that. But we do have to factor human nutrition into that. And yes, part of that, as Hugh said, is finding food that you really enjoy and you really love, because then you are more likely to make those changes and stick to them. But back to your question, when it comes to selecting foods in season, out of season, locally imported, so we look very closely at that, and we take a number of factors into account. So yes, of course, carbon footprinting different foods, really important. But then we also think about things like fair trade and foods that are produced in other countries, and then how much of an impact it has producing it in a country with a high yield that uses far less planetary resources, and then perhaps shipping it as an export option, which does use a far smaller percentage of global emissions. Obviously, things like air freighting food is a terrible idea, and depends where you are in the world, how much that happens. So for instance, I lived in Singapore for a few years, and a lot of the food was air freighted. So salmon, Norwegian salmon as an example, would have been flown in every week, twice a week. A lot of food from Australia and New Zealand, huge amount, even berries from America, air freighted. So you can imagine that the carbon emissions of that was crazy, was absolutely bonkers, just does not make sense. So you mentioned tomatoes, which are a really good one. SDG, Mary, very good question. It stands for the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So go and Google SDGs. Fascinating, really interesting, and definitely the way of the world now. So back to tomatoes, from a sustainability point of view, very specifically, after October in Ireland, growing tomatoes is pretty much a disaster from a sustainability point of view. But we have this mentality that we want things 12 months of the year, 365 days of the year. And I think then perhaps we have to look at importing them from neighbors that have better outputs, low resource usage, and then also using things that are frozen or tin tomatoes and so on and so forth, and just change your menu and change your recipes to reflect the seasons. And a lot of countries will be very used to that, and it's very traditional. I mean, that's where preserved vegetables and tomatoes largely come from, would be countries like Italy. They would be, as part of their culture, as part of the traditions, would be bottling and preserving and pickling foods. And it's great to see an interest in that. I think people are really taking a big interest in fermenting foods and pickling foods and preserving foods. And it's part of the flow of the seasons and of our food system to embrace that and to look at that really closely.
Fantastic. Emily and Medhanie, how do you see this?
Hey everyone, I'm Emily from Vita, Program Officer here. Yeah, I just will tell you a few things about like what I try to do in my daily life. And I don't know if I'm doing the right things, but I'm picking up some tips here. So first of all, I only try to buy what I need. If a recipe says you only need 1 carrot, it makes more sense to buy a single carrot rather than buying a big discount bag of 10 carrots, say, and it's cheaper as well. So I find this cuts down on packaging and also on food waste. And recently I've been trying more to buy what's in season. But I suppose in Ireland, where most of us are a little removed from the land or from growing food. And as Rozanne said, there's like such a huge variety of ingredients available to us all year round in the supermarket. So it's hard to know actually sometimes what's in season right now in Ireland. So, but like everyone else, over the past year, I've had more time on my hands. So I've been learning more, and also it's given me more time to do more meal planning and try out new recipes and new ingredients that, yeah, I've been experimenting and having fun with.
Fantastic, fantastic. That's very real life, isn't it, Emily? And like, I think that's very important because there's so much I think people will be able to squeeze into their daily lives in terms of theory. They just want to give it real life. So amazing. Very good. And Medhanie, I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong, but here we are. Nice to meet you. And do tell us about your story.
Okay. Thanks, Pat, for introducing me. And I'm Medhanie. Let me introduce from Eritrea. For some of you who don't know, Eritrea is a small country in the Horn of Africa. Having almost an equal population with Ireland. Just now I am at the UCD studying master's degree. About this carbon footprint, I came to know especially from the projects that are going on, funded by Irish Aid, by Vita in my country. I can say that the people there in Eritrea or in the neighboring country in Africa, still the awareness is quite less in the impacts of our daily life. The food that we are eating daily could have an impact to the greenhouse gas emissions or like global warming. Based on the assumption that because we are not eating processed foods, we have less processed industries. It's assuming that the impact is that we are only the receivers of the global warming. But our food, our main meals is basically the meals that we are consuming in Eritrea, sorghum and others, and the turf there is. Definitely it comes from, I can say directly from the soil. There is no much processor for us. Definitely in that term, it's definitely it's helping in reducing the impact of the carbon footprint, because we are getting them directly from the soil, and like farmers market, like there is also such things in Ireland, I observed here. Buying them in a bulk, not processed in small quantities. Definitely this helps to reduce the carbon footprint. But on the other hand, that we don't observe mainly the awareness, less I can say, is the time it takes to process it. I mean, to cook it in our home, we are cooking it a lot there in our home. We boil it for longer period of time. I observed here in Ireland, it's quite different. That's the difference we have. It's they consume here just from packed foods, smaller you buy from stores, which definitely contributes to the carbon footprint. There we are consuming from the farms, we buy loose foods. But on the other hand, here you boil them very little. Definitely it contributes very less to the carbon footprint, but we boil them there very long. And definitely we have one unique meal also. Basically it's in Eritrea and Ethiopia. We call it injera. It's quite a big pancake that requires a lot of energy to consume, to be prepared, because it needs a big stove, a big cook stove. Traditionally in the rural areas, they use firewoods. So here, it contributes two things. First, we are destroying the woods, firewoods, the trees, for the use of the firewood. And the other thing is we are using, increasing the smoke also, releasing the smokes to the environments also. These are the things that still needs to be, people need to be aware. Definitely, the people are definitely now getting increased. The knowledge getting increased with the project there, with the others. But still, I can feel that we are contributing something also to the carbon footprint.
Very interesting. So your injera,
yes,
main meal,
yes.
would that be like in the middle of the day? Would be a night meal, and would that be like a lot of different things? Like, that's just out of curiosity.
Yes, it's our main staple food. Stable food in Eritrea and Ethiopia. We consume it mainly in the lunchtime and the dinner time with other stew, potato or any other stew. We use it as a bread, to hold the other stews.
Yeah. Fantastic. So hopefully one day we'll get to meet and experience that. So amazing. So before we move on, I just want to release here we have 3 polls that we're going to release during this chat. So I'm going to ask you guys, here we go. How often have you considered the carbon cost of your meals? Because we're going to go into real tips now. So I think we spoke about concept, about, this is it. Let's think about it. So let's see how you guys are doing when it comes to thinking about this thing. Please do vote. And while we are at it, I'm going to ask Rozanne, bring you back, Rozanne. You are an advocate for zero waste meals. There must be an incredible job you have. I would be so curious to see it. But the question is here, right? How do they feed into carbon costing? Because I'm assuming zero waste is already a great step, right, when it comes to reducing your carbon emissions and everything. But how do they fit into this world? And what tips would you have to share here with us when it comes to zero waste cooking, as well as, trying to reduce the emissions generated by whatever you are cooking? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. Rookie mistake. Just to follow what was said, is the work that we do, very interestingly, is we do look at energy efficiency of appliances, electricity used. It's a resource. We do look at water consumption, air quality in kitchens, all of those things that they are all really important. And in the end life cycle of the food, your waste management has to be 100% immaculate. and we do cover composting and biodigesting. So we actually reverse engineer the process, and I spent the first year on waste management. And so I know more about waste management than I ever wanted to know. So I would say for people at home, first thing that you do, you can have the most immaculate menus planned and fabulous food that you buy, but unless your waste segregation is absolutely perfect, that's going to end up in landfill. And then you are contributing to this global problem of methane emissions that is the third biggest cause of global warming. So
one question I would ask you there, just sorry to pause you, but when you say the perfect segregation, are you talking about your recycling and your composting or anything beyond that?
Everything, because you'll be at a point where not everything is recyclable in Ireland, and we can try and reduce buying things that are packaged in plastic as much as we like, but we will still be forced to buy some things, unfortunately. But you need to make sure that whatever's going into recycling is clean and it's dry. Okay, no little particles of things, no dirty pizza boxes, nothing like that. So you really need to go and educate yourself about that. I'm a big fan of composting. So there is going to be some waste when it comes to food preparation and things like that. That's almost unavoidable, unless you get to an industrial scale where you can do things with perhaps eggshells and things like that. So composting at home is a really fantastic habit to get into, because your brown bin is a bit of a grey area. And some people buy products that are meant to be compostable, containers and so on and so forth. But unless your waste management company, you have an agreement with them and they know that that exact container is compostable, it's going to end up in landfill. So don't assume that because you're buying something that's compostable, that it's actually going to be composted, unless you physically do it yourself in your own composting process at home, or bin, whatever you have going on at home. So that's not a glamorous answer, but that's the honest truth, is start where you can have the most impact immediately, and then work at preventing your food waste at home. And the biggest area where we cause food waste is in fresh produce. So a lot of the work that we do is around fresh produce and not buying too much, not over purchasing, storing things properly. And then if you've got a glut of something, what to do with that glut. Maybe you've got loads of tomatoes or loads of courgettes, and what are you going to do with them? Perhaps you're going to freeze them, perhaps you're going to pickle them, perhaps you're going to do all those things. But to really fix our food system, we need to stop buying excess food, because we are sending the wrong message up the food chain. So if Rozanne Stevens every single week buys a bag of lettuce that ends up in the compost, that's not solving the problem. I'm still sending that message up the food chain that I need my bag of baby salad leaves every single week. So it has a lot of ramifications when we are buying too much food, and whether you're throwing the food away and it ends up in landfill, it ends up in the compost bin, they all have ramifications. So I'm a big fan of staple crops. So your pulses, your beans, your lentils and chickpeas, and for lunch, bringing back to our carbon footprint in our lunch, they make a really good, solid cornerstone to build a lunch around. So you can make fantastic soups, you can make fantastic wraps, salads. Mason jar salads are great. You can make a few of these ahead of time and they'll stay fresh for 3 to 4 days in the fridge. Glass is great, obviously, for preserving your food and keeping it nice and fresh. Another strategy I really like is batch cooking on a Saturday, and then freezing things in individual portions. So it could be a nice soup, it could be a chili, it could be a topping for baked potato. So freezing is a really good food preservation method, but you just need to make sure then that you freeze it properly and that you plan on when you're going to eat it. So that's part of your planning. So all the recipe development work that we do in DCU is all vegetarian. We do find a place for meat and seafood and try and make the most sustainable choices around that. So I have a policy document. It's a living document. But one of the policies that I have for my work is that 100% of animal proteins are sourced in Ireland. For a lot of reasons, and touching on local is sometimes you'll choose to support a local producer, not because they've got the lowest carbon footprint, but for other reasons. You are supporting a local producer, you're supporting a local economy, you might be supporting a female farmer, gender equality, creating work, creating communities, bringing back to the SDGs. So if you look at things holistically like that, there is that little bit of a balance. I know people get very concerned about food miles, but you can chime in on this. But most of the data shows that the carbon emissions occur at food production stage, not just the miles it's traveled, unless it's air miles, which we covered, which is a disaster. So if you want to chime in on that.
Yeah, for sure. Rozanne, I definitely echo that. I think when we talk about food miles, like you mentioned, the impact of cargo or air freighting produce is definitely the highest impact. And just to give you an idea, like you're probably like, well, how do I know if something's going to be air freighted or if it's going to be shipped? Like it's definitely not going to say that on the packet. Well, the good rule of thumb is it like fresh produce with a short shelf life out of season. So for example, if you're having, say, strawberries in like in the winter time, likely they're going to be air freighted. They've got a short shelf life, so they got to get quickly from the farm to market. Likewise, if you're getting, like, say, green beans or something like that from Kenya, it's going to be air freighted most likely. So things that aren't as bad as people think, say, like, for example, bananas, they'll be cargo freighted, so it's not going to be as big an impact. And then something like citrus fruit as well, it'll be, and as well, citrus fruit at room temp is stored at room temperature, close to room temperature when it goes through cargo freighting and it's shipped. So even then, that's lower impact than some other fruits. For example, like shipping apples from the southern hemisphere to the European market will have a higher impact than other fresh produce on the same ship, given that it has to be stored at a lower temperature. So, but general rule of thumb when it comes to the transportation is that, yeah, is this a fresh product that has a short shelf life, and is it like, if it's not obviously grown in my general region at this time of year, that's why it's got to be air freighted. And just to touch on why I say, like, it's the agricultural processes that seem to have like the biggest share of impact, and it's really not that intuitive for us. Like, there are a couple of factors in play. One is land use change. For example, like land that's being converted from what was wilderness or forest into agricultural land, there's a huge carbon cost associated with that. There's some basic farming practices that inherently release CO2 as they're used. For example, even plowing a field, when you turn the sod, the CO2 that's stored or the carbon stored in that soil is then released, and that's on an annual basis. And then one good thing to understand as well is, like, why do animal products have such a higher impact? It's because we're eating higher up the food chain. For producing that those calories, in effect, to be crude about it, or that protein in an animal product, there's much more input required from plant-based sources. And anyone with an agricultural background, even in Ireland, although we are good for being able to, I suppose, use grass practices, there's no farmer in the country, or very few, who don't feed some kind of supplementary grain. And where does that come from in the first instance? That's likely soy-based product, and that's likely coming from deforested regions in the southern hemisphere. And so there's, like, it's a much more complex supply chain, and those are the reasons why it comes in at much higher impact. And for example, like, I think it's north of 70% of the world's soy, even up to like 80-90%, is just used as animal feed. So there are many factors in that case.
Fantastic. Oh my goodness. We're talking about food waste, Rozanne. I recently learned that the amount of edible mass of fruit and veggies wasted in the EU is around 46%, which is nuts, right? When you stop to think, like, you could be eating the 46%, but we waste it. So
absolutely. I mean, statistically, there currently is actually enough food in the world to feed everyone. There's enough calories produced in the world to feed everyone, but it's obviously very badly distributed, and huge inequalities there. So that's SDG 0 hunger, SDG 2. You can tie that in. So again, if we can prevent that food waste and send the right messages up the food chain, then we can help solve that problem as well. And it is a huge problem. So some food waste does occur in production. I mean, I'm a farmer's daughter, so I'm under no illusions. So some of it does occur in the actual farming process, but a huge amount of it comes from domestic waste. So since lockdown, domestic waste in Ireland went up 40%. Understandably, because everyone's at home, there are no restaurants and cafes open. I think there was a bit of a panic initially, buying lots and lots of food, and then it went off, things like that. So there's lots of reasons we can extrapolate from that. But in parallel to that, that's really interesting. In surveys done, it's something that's very, very concerning to most people in how to solve this food waste issue. And I think a lot of it is tackling it from the wrong end. So things like, say, taking vegetable peelings and things like that and trying to do something creative with that, fine, on a small scale. But if you get very sidelined by that, you're not seeing the point of it. And that's trying to prevent the food waste before it happens, and where the real waste is occurring at home. And on a catering level, I know chefs like doing very creative and fun and exciting things, and they love a challenge, but it can actually also use a lot more resources. Looking at that end of things and, say, trying to turn all your banana peels into a relish, because it's more sugar, it's more vinegar, it's more spices, more electricity, it's more time, it's all of those things. And are you really making an impact when it comes to that? So I'd say start, obviously, the waste management, so you have an immediate impact. And the next thing is planning. Planning really is key. And I'm just going to give you one tip with this. Don't overplan. As things open up again in Ireland,
Rozanne, is Rozanne frozen for everybody?
I think so.
Yeah.
Maybe closer for the moment.
Okay. Well, I suppose, guys, we will just keep going. I think this was a great segue. Like, we talk about Europe and Ireland, very interesting. But I want to ask now, Medhanie and Emily, how are the farmers in Eritrea, or African farmers in general, and communities being affected by climate change? And if there is anyone taking actual, action with people vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, so we can all adapt to this challenge. So if you could shed some light here, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I'll start off with kind of the general picture. So in Africa and elsewhere in the global south, countries are experiencing more and more extreme weather events, like flash floods and a series of intense droughts. And in the Horn of Africa, where Vita works, I think about 80% of people are subsistence farmers and depend on the land to survive. So these extreme weather events are very devastating for them, because they're wiping out crops or farm animals. So obviously that's really unfair, but what's really unfair about this situation is the people suffering the most from climate breakdown, often people who are living in poorer countries in Africa and other countries in the global south, did not really create the climate change that we're living with today. Even today, if you want to look at like the average carbon footprint of a person in Ireland versus a person in, say, Eritrea or Ethiopia, our average carbon footprint per capita is 40 times higher than the average carbon footprint of a person in Ethiopia or Eritrea. But even in resource rich countries like ours, we're not all the same. And people have different levels of advantage or disadvantage. But yet we all need to move forward to a greener society. But I think it's unrealistic to expect a person who is struggling to make ends meet, whether it's in Ireland or elsewhere, to take climate action if that climate action step is costly and unaffordable to that person. So clearly we have to support less well-off or marginalized communities, both in Ireland and internationally, to transition to a low-emission society and develop in a sustainable way. Otherwise, our efforts will be for nothing, and only wealthy people will be able to afford to take climate action, and inequality will be further increased and vulnerable people will be left behind. So that's what really motivates Vita and shapes our work. It's about creating opportunities for poorer communities or more marginalized communities to have the benefit from climate solutions.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Medhanie, what's your view on that as well?
Yeah, thanks, Pat and Emily. As Emily said, quite, the impact is quite very high in the African communities in Eritrea, in the other all sub-Saharan African countries. As the farmers, as she said, are subsistent. They depend on the nature, on the land, and they depend on the phase they have to the nature also, that they wait only something would come, the rain will come. And dramatically, this all, the climate change is affecting, the rain pattern, increasing drought and flood. It increases disease and pest pressure as it mutates them. Like introducing new pests also getting introduced, like the pests, locust swarm, which was in the past years, it was heavy. Locust swarm affected the many African, sub-Saharan African countries. When we come to the what actions, either inaction to taking there is, the awareness on the source and impact of the climate change is quite increasing. I can say, and the governments and different organizations are coming forward with different solutions for this unprivileged communities. In Eritrea, to reduce the impact of the climate change and reclaim the degraded landscape, different strategies are under implementation, mainly by mobilizing the community, such as planting of the trees and the introduction of improved cook stove. I told you our cook stove is one of the main things that contributes to increasing of carbon greenhouse gas emissions, and definitely a lot of energy. So different organizations like Vita are just working a lot into that. And the policy of agriculture is definitely improved to cope up with this change. Like now, the Minister of Agriculture is focusing in diversification of crops and livestock, so that they can reduce the impact and ensure food and nutrition security, such as there is a package called Minimum Integrated Household Agricultural Package, which promotes the subsistence farmers to have a small plot of land and produce different type of crops, integrated with livestock and planting of tree and fodder and fruit trees, so that they can have a nutrition also there, produced locally. The organizations like Vita, it gives me pleasure to mention, what they are doing is like, it's a marvelous thing. Vita, Chagas, Self-Help Africa, and mainly funded by Irish Aid, is working in coherence, with the Eritrean government to improve the livelihoods of rural communities. The project is running there by Vita, Irish Aid, and others. In Eritrea and actually in Ethiopia also, they are decreasing, they are making great impacts in the climate change and reducing the source also, like by promoting improved cook stove. Most importantly, these projects that are run by Vita and founded by Irish Aid, are community-based and science related with the science also. I can say it's like from bottom up and up to bottom. So start from the community and mobilize them and work with them so that they can benefit from their nature and so that they can benefit the other community also. Introduction of resilient cultivars that adapt to the climate change, tolerate to the drought, erratic rainfall, and the so-called climate smart potato, wheat, cereal millet, and others, and milk, dairy cows also.
I'm actually not going to let you talk about potatoes anymore because we're going to have a question about
it. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I want to go on. No, go on.
Yeah, my main thing is that the main thing they do is that by introducing resilient crops, different crops, and there are a lot of also other dairy projects that promote farmers to have their own one cattle, so that the farmer will have for his own and for his community there. Others, like the cook stove I told you. The cook stove is one of the great improved cook stove developed by the Minister of Energy of our country. Vita is promoting this improved cook stove people's trees. So far, from the day Vita on the Irish Aid put their foot in Eritrea, they have promoted about 45,000 improved cook stoves they have constructed in collaboration with the community. And the different other, so the water sanitation programs, so that the people will not bother to boil it, so that you are reducing the carbon output from that also. Planting of trees, more than 3 million trees have been already planted, so that it reclaims the land and composting. Yeah, this is some of the things, some of the marvelous things lying there by Vita.
Yeah, no, this is fantastic. And yeah. I'll take that opportunity to bring up our next poll, which is basically, after today's events, would you say that you're aware of how food choices impact on climate change in communities in the global south? I would like to believe that we are very much aware right now, but I'll let you guys vote for a little minute or two. Now, back to the potato, because it wouldn't be an Irish conversation without mentioning this delicious little thing. I want to ask also, again, Medhanie and Emily, how can potatoes help African farmers and communities who are affected by climate change? You started there, Medhanie, talking about it. And the other question I will throw in just as we go is like, what would you like people here today who are getting their lunch ready to know about climate change and the choices we make as consumers? So again, back to you guys.
Yeah, I'll just say a little bit about potatoes and why they're a good crop for climate change. So a lot of Vita's work revolves around climate smart agriculture. And as Medhanie said, creating access to kind of crop varieties that are more suitable to the changing weather conditions. So potatoes, obviously they're highly nutritious, we know that. And they produce more food per kind of land area than many other major staple crops. So 3 to 5 times more than wheat or rice, for example. So they're a good crop for increasing food security and food supply as well in these countries. And because they're a bulky crop and they're less likely to be exported, and so they're less subject to kind of like price volatility or price fluctuation. So it provides a kind of a stable income for the potato farmers or whoever the people are who are growing potatoes. So that's kind of some of the interesting things about potatoes.
I'm growing potatoes myself right now, and I love doing it. So easy, very resistant. And Medhanie, so do you have any more to talk to us about that? Or even if you want to talk to us about what people here, what should we be thinking about when preparing our lunches today?
Yeah, it's, it gives me a lot of pleasure, to talk about potato. When we talk about climate change, especially in Africa, the first thing that comes into our mind is the variability in the rainfall, that it's making. So potato is, as Emily said, it's one of the crops that have high water use efficiency. You get per drop of water. The productivity per drop of water is higher than any other crop. So it helps us in we cope up with the erratic rainfall, low spatial distribution of the rainfall, and others. And nutritionally, it's a rich source of all the nutrients. Some experts even say that having potato and a cup of milk fulfills almost all the requirements a person needs per day. And due to its high starch content, potato also acts as a staple food in many countries. So if you take potato, you don't need to worry about carbohydrates from wheat and others. And you can take an example that in the 1980s, Irish main food was potato until the famine in 1945 comes. To many farmers, potato is also a cash crop in African countries, especially in my country. So it increased their income than any other crop because it gives higher yield per area. So we can see the impact of potato crop in the farmers' livelihood in the Horn of Africa, mainly in Eritrea and Ethiopia, and from the initiatives undertaken by Vita, Irish Aid, Self-Help Africa, and others. Potato agriculture is also associated with low greenhouse gas emissions relative to other major crops. Therefore, it can be said that it's a climate smart option. And some researchers even say that potato is one of the crops that adapt quickly to climate change and make use of the carbon dioxide for its benefit. Basically, it means that it's acting as a sink for carbon. So yeah, finally, I want to say the change, in the climate due to the increased carbon footprints, generally speaking, at greenhouse gas emissions, not only carbon, cannot be blamed to industries or government choice, policy, or strategy only. Every individual has a contribution to the greenhouse, as previous said. Either decrease it or increase it. Sometimes it's good to pause for a moment from our routine habit of living or food eating practices, and think, is our choice contributing positively or negatively to the ecosystem, which in turn affects our life and the life of others. You can think of the world itself. The word itself, it says global warming. I have never heard of local warming. Whatever choice we take here affected the other communities in the world. We can see an example. The food we are taking packed in plastics to bring those foods into such packed state until into our table. They have passed through different energy consuming stages where it leaves some carbon there at every stage. Then we eat our meals and throw the packing materials. Then two things may happen. Either it goes to the recycling, and there it needs also energy to be recycled. And the second thing is we throw it away. Then this goes to the ecosystem. For example, if it goes to the sea, it affects the aquatic diversity, their fish abundance and others. And there we need fish again, so we have to produce them artificially in an enclosed system. So you are consuming again another energy. So there again you produce more energy and more carbon. So we may think the industries are producing just highly processed foods or something else, but our choice, are also dictating them, I can say. And policymakers should support more to the initiatives that.
Look, it is. It's a big, I suppose, system.
Yeah.
But I think
Yes.
your point of, we can all make a difference. We can all think about what we're doing.
Yes.
Is spot on, because at times we forget about that, isn't it?
Yes. Yes.
So unfortunately, we'll have to wrap up. I could talk to you guys forever. It's amazing. So a big thanks to our panel. Thanks Hugh. Thanks Rozanne. Thanks Medhanie. Thanks.
Thanks.
Please remember the libraries are open across Dublin and ready for you guys. Please remember to sign up to Rozanne's newsletter. Just check her Instagram. Please remember to download Evocco's app and support Vita if you can, and check reuzi if you can. So there you go. I think I did everybody. Back to Paula now.
Yes, thank you very much, Pat. That was really informative. I know I will never look at my sandwich the same way again. So I hope you all learned something, found it informative, and also enjoyed it. So on behalf of Dublin City Libraries, Vita and Irish Aid, I'd like to thank all our panelists. Thank you so much. Thank you, Pat, for being our moderator and doing such a fantastic job, and using the technology as well. We got through. And naturally, thank you very much to the audience. Thank you all for coming to this event. As Pat said, we are absolutely thrilled in Dublin City Libraries to be open again. Our doors are open, so hopefully we'll be seeing you again in person soon. Just remember, online events are still going on. You can find our events on the library's webpage, www.dublincitylibraries.ie, and on our usual social media. So all I can say again is thank you very much, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.